Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. While we're waiting for everyone to kind of pour in, we kind of wanted this to be a conversation where we get an opinion and understand the budget better and how it impacts us. But also, we thought that we could just start off with understanding who all are a part of the audience. The first one is, where are you currently based, and where are you kind of joining us from? And we will then, so I will just share my screen. Let me know if everyone can see. And which field you work in. So the idea of this is that we wanted it to be a multi-stakeholder conversation to make this as rich as possible, whether you're from technology, innovation, business, food, design, hospitality. This is a conversation that impacts all of us. So it's very interesting to see where everyone's joining us from. Okay, so that's journalism, food history, that's super interesting. Chef, architecture, mechanical engineering, research, journalism. High school teacher, that's great. Perfect. Great, so as people keep coming in, we're going to, all of us from food businesses, that's amazing. As people keep coming in, they can continue to do that, and we'll kind of map out where everyone's joining us from. So I think we're 5 minutes in, so let's begin. To start off, the reason we're doing this is because the union budget came out recently. It has huge ramifications on the Indian food system, and we're very curious to understand how is it that it impacts our livelihoods, nutrition, how does it impact the farming and fishing communities, as well as how does it shape what we eat and how we eat. Joining us today would be Sarthak. Sarthak is an assistant fellow at Takshashila Institution, and he's been closely following the budget and the figures and the numbers, which a lot of us may find daunting. So he's here to decode and demystify all of that for us. This event is co-hosted by Edible Issues, which is a collective run by Elizabeth as well as Anusha. And they've been working, they're almost completing 3 years on the 14th of Feb. And they've been doing a wonderful job of fostering thought regarding the Indian food system. I also run Food is Political, which explores the intersection of food and policy, specifically in our current geopolitical context. So thank you so much for joining us. If you're ready, let's just dive straight in. Sarthak, what do you think?
Yeah, sure, Takshama, why not?
Okay, perfect. So would you want to start us off with telling us a little bit about the budget? What is it? You wanted to explain to us how is it that we can correctly read it? So.
Yeah, so the budget is also called commonly we use the term budget, but it is called as the annual financial statement. And every year, 1st of February, it is presented in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha, by the finance minister. And there is a lot of discussions related to budget. Typically, you will find, you will have a discussion related to allocations. Numbers will be there. So, but again, these numbers can sometimes be daunting. How do we understand it? So what I will do is I'll just tell you what are those things which are part of the budget. Whenever the finance minister is presenting the budget, there are 3 kind of numbers over there. One is they will have the estimate for the upcoming fiscal year. So for 2021-22, what is going to be the allocation for different schemes, for different programs, for different ministries, departments, that is there. And generally the discussion is around this. But apart from this, there are 2 other numbers. One is the revised estimates for the previous year. So this budget that was presented will also be having the revised estimates for 2020-21. So maybe last year they would have said we will be allocating 100 crore rupees to this particular program, but it might not have happened. They might have released 80 crores, or sometimes it might so happen that they might have released 120 crores. So whatever was revised, that is also there. Apart from that, the actual expenditure of last year, that is also there. So 3 numbers are there. So for 2019-20, what was spent on different schemes, policies, programs, departments, that will be there. Revised estimates for 2020-21 is there. And 21-22, what is the estimate? Now, how do you see the budget? See, the budget basically tells you about the intention of the government, about its priorities, right? They might say right now that they're going to allocate this much amount of money. That does not mean that they are definitely going to allocate that much amount of money. Things might change. So you just get to know the priorities of the government at a particular point of time. Right now, we know this is the priority from the budget. But again, this is only numbers, right? This is only a monetary number, the allocation. You might say that you are going to allocate 1,000 crores to this particular ministry or a program. But that 1,000 crore, how it is going to impact you, what is going to be the output, what is going to be the outcome, that is also something which is not discussed. But since the last couple of years, what has been happening is, along with the budget, the government is also releasing an output-outcome framework that specifies that if 1,000 crore is invested in this particular ministry, what is the stated intent, what is the stated objective, what is the stated outcome, what is the stated output. That also it mentions. For example, let's say the government invests 1,000 crore in some crop insurance scheme. So that 1,000 crore rupees will provide insurance coverage to how many farmers? What is going to be the sum insured? So all those things are mentioned in the output-outcome framework. That is again something which generally in the normal discourse, media discourse, you will not find. And ideally what should happen is you should be talking about those things. And again, you should be measuring over a period of time whether these things have been met or not. And if you are able to find that out, then you can hold the institutions accountable. But sadly, the sad picture is generally we don't measure all those things. We might not have mechanisms to measure that thing. So as a result of which, we only keep on talking about the allocations, right? So this is how the budget looks like. 3 numbers, and apart from that, you have the output-outcome framework.
Okay. So
yeah, Takshama.
Yeah. So what will be?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think it's a little lag from my side, but what we'll be doing is we'll be asking Sarthak a few questions. Please feel free to type in the questions, refer to the links that are being put up in the chat. We have muted the participants, but we'll be leaving a huge chunk of our time towards the end of the line of questioning that we have for everyone to open up and ask the questions that they feel are relevant. I hope that's okay with everyone, and then we'll jump right into the questions. Starting off, Sarthak, so we have certain schemes and programs that are dedicated towards the agricultural sector. Could you please elaborate on those?
Yes, exactly. So the union budget, again, is, as I told you, it has all the, it is basically a statement of intentions of the government. So it will have all the allocations for different ministries. And at present, we have one ministry which is directly in charge of agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture, Cooperation and Farmers Welfare. And there are some other ministries as well which can have a role in agriculture. We'll come to that in a while. So within this Ministry of Agriculture, Farmer Welfare and Cooperation, you have 2 departments. One is for research, agricultural research. Another is the ministry which is for different kind of schemes and programs which is related to agriculture. Now, if you look at the allocation, if you compare it with last year, the allocation has reduced by around 8%, right? The total allocation that was there, the estimates that was there for 2020-21, it has got reduced by 8%. But the revised estimates, finally, what was the revised estimate for last year? If you compare it with that, there has been an increase of 5%. But yeah, again, this increase is because last year the government did not release sufficient amount of money for agriculture. They would have promised something, they released less. And now they are saying we will be releasing more than what we released last time. But this number is less than last year's initial promise that was there, 8% less. Now, for this Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, again, generally the allocation is somewhere around 1,20,000 crore. That range is there. The largest chunk of money goes to which scheme? Pradhan Mantri Kisan scheme. This scheme is basically about providing direct monetary support to farmers. So farmers are provided some 6,000 rupees per year monetary support. So that consists around 50% of the total agriculture, this particular department's budgetary allocation. And if you observe, there has been again some reduction in the allocation this time. Almost 10,000 crores it has been reduced as compared to last year, 13% less. Monetary support has been reduced. Apart from that, there are some other mechanisms which are there for increasing agriculture production or productivity. How we can develop infrastructure in agriculture. So you have schemes like Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. This is an irrigation scheme. Now again, allocation has been more or less same. Then there is Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. Promised allocation has been more or less same as compared to last year. But thing is, if you look at the revised estimates for the previous year, there has been a massive reduction. So government promised last year that they are going to release this much amount of money, but after some point of time, they have not. So when it comes to the irrigation schemes, 35% reduction in revised estimate happened last year. So the thing is, if they're promising 100 units this time, you also have to consider that last year, the final release was less. So again, maybe similar kind of trends will happen. Same thing applies with Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana as well. Now, there is one more scheme which provides insurance to farmers. Again, farmers face different kind of risks. And in case of India, where most of the farmers, the large section of farmers, they are dependent on monsoons for rainfall. And again, they do not have a different kind of infrastructure. So they face multiple risks. So to basically mitigate for this risk, you have some kind of insurance programs. We have a scheme called as Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Here also allocation has been more or less same. It has not changed. But if you look at the output-outcome framework, you will realize that with the same amount of money, they are now covering lesser number of farmers. Last year, with the same amount of money, they were providing insurance coverage to 12.5 crore farmers. This year, with the same amount of allocation, they aim to cover somewhere around some 12 crore farmers. Some 50 lakh farmers will not be having that much coverage. So this is something that can be worrying. Apart from that, there has been some schemes for infrastructure development. In recent times, this has been an issue. The farmer bills and all these controversies are there. It's going on. And one of the major issues that has come up is we don't have the right kind of infrastructure for agriculture. So the government has promised 1 lakh for agricultural infrastructure. But in this budget, they are talking about 900 crores for improving agricultural infrastructure in the APMC mandis. Apart from that, Rural Infrastructure Development Fund, again, it can help build rural infrastructure. There has been an increase of around 10,000 crores. So broadly, if you look at the larger schemes, main schemes in agriculture, these are the things that we see.
When we're talking about the production aspect, we have farmers, but we also have the fishermen and the fishing community.
Yeah.
And we've been hearing about Blue Revolution. So could you please elaborate a little bit more on those?
Yes. So fisheries, again, it is handled by another ministry. It's not part of Ministry of Agriculture. So you have a separate ministry for that. Now, here there has been a new thing. In fact, this was initiated last year. It was not part of the last year budget, but somewhere in that financial year, this thing came up. And the government initiated one scheme that was called as the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampad Yojana. So under this scheme, what they are trying to do, they are trying to promote infrastructure in fisheries sector, and they are trying to promote different kind of research and development in fisheries sector. Apart from that, post-harvest infrastructure, they are also trying to build. And for this, the allocation has been increased. So last year, they allocated somewhere around 700 crores. This year, they're increasing it to 1,000 crores. And this is something which can have impact on employment in fisheries sector. It can again increase economic activities in fisheries sector. And not only fisheries, another aspect is their animal husbandry, right? Because dairy farmers also play an important role. They are also important part of the food system. Here also, there has been some changes. And given that we had a pandemic and again, zoonotic diseases and all those things are a cause of concern. So they have initiated one program, which is the Livestock Health and Diseases Control Program. In fact, this program was there in the past, but again, the allocation was less. This year, they have increased the allocation, some 1,400 crores. But one thing has to be noted, another program was there, National Animal Disease Control Program, that has been wrapped up. So maybe they have repackaged this into this form. But I mean, maybe they have all these things we will get to know when it starts getting implemented. As I told you, the budget is a statement of the intention of the government. Now they will be demanding these grants. Then there will be voting on that. And finally, the Lok Sabha will decide. And then these things get implemented. But the point is, yeah, maybe they are prioritizing on the health and prioritizing on ensuring that diseases and all these things among livestock can be taken care of. Yeah, so these are the prominent things when it comes to production.
So I think Rini is again asking, and I know we've left the Q&A towards the end, but I thought this would tie in because you spoke about the insurance. She said, is there any Yojana, specific scheme for insurance?
Yes. Yes, exactly, Rini. So there is one scheme that is called as Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Fasal means again agricultural harvest, right? So we have a scheme for that, and under that farmers are covered in case they have any crop losses. So we have a scheme for that, and in fact, for Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the allocation has remained more or less same, just that the targets have been reduced slightly. So that is the case. We have a scheme for that. And in fact, we have been having these kind of crop insurance schemes for a long period of time. Before the name was something else, now it is Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima
Yojana. One important thing is that we've all in the past couple of months been seeing this growing conversation around the farm bills and how that kind of ties into the APMCs as well as the minimum support price that the farmers are offered. So could you please elaborate a little bit more about how is a union budget likely to impact this conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, the farm bills, again, if you look at the conversation around farm bills, two things are there, right? One is there is an apprehension among the farmers that the minimum support prices might be taken away. So that kind of apprehension is there. And again, they are continuously saying that give us an assurance that, yeah, minimum support prices will be here to stay. And another thing is there that, I mean, the government is saying that at least that is the intention of the farm bills, that farmers will be having greater choices. They can now sell their produce outside the APMCs. Still now they have been, again, there are different kind of restrictions they have to sell within the APMCs. But one of the issues that has been flagged by farmers again and again is we don't have the right kind of infrastructure. Some states in India, for example, Bihar, they have removed, I mean, all these kind of restrictions. They removed it long back, but the farmers have not benefited. And one of the major reason here is the infrastructure is lacking. So infrastructure development and MSPs, they are the most contentious issues. And if you look at the union budget, when it comes to infrastructure, they have promised something. For example, the Agricultural Infrastructure Fund, 900 crore allocation will be for building infrastructure in the APMC regions. But another thing is a major concern, that is minimum support prices. So the government is saying that we will be assuring minimum support prices, but there are two schemes which are which ensure that these entire mechanism works, the minimum support price mechanism works. These schemes are market intervention scheme, and then there is one scheme which is called as PM Asha. So for both these schemes, if you observe, the allocations have been reduced. So some of the farmer organizations have been questioning this, that you are saying that MSPs will be there, but again, if you look at the union budget, the budgetary allocations have gone down. If you look at the revised estimates for last year as compared to the budget estimates of previous year, for market intervention scheme, it became half. And the budgetary estimates this year for PM Asha is almost, has been reduced by almost 25% of last time. So those are apprehensions, but yeah, the positive part is maybe the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund might be something which can allay some of the fears.
Thank you so much for that balanced point of view. Moving on to the livelihoods, because at the end of the day, we talk about production, but the ones that are getting affected at the communities on ground. How is this impacting the farmers as well as the fishing communities that are, handling the bulk of the production for the nation?
Yeah, so again, livelihood is a major concern. Two ways. One is, I mean, you can look at it like this: how many direct opportunities you are creating. Are these schemes going to create a lot of opportunities? Again, I won't say that. I mean, union budget has a role to play. I'm not denying that. But again, agriculture is something which is typically under the state list, right? So they will have a larger role to play here. But yeah, a union government can also play a role here. But one thing that needs to be given attention is a lot of people who are engaged in agriculture, they do not have a stable livelihood throughout the year. Whenever there is this peak season, whenever you have harvest, when you have the harvest season, they at that point of time, they will be having some income, but throughout the year, they might not be having a stable source of income. So they need some form of social security. They need some sort of protection in this respect. And we have schemes like NREGA, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, and the law is NREGA, which tries to ensure this, that, okay, they will have some sustained livelihood, even during the off-peak seasons. But if you observe, the allocation to Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme has been reduced. So last year we had the allocation was increased massively. Again, maybe because last time people did not have sufficient opportunities because of the pandemic, but this time it has been reduced. So that can be a cause of concern for people who are the agricultural laborers who probably don't own sufficient amount of land that they can cultivate on their own. They're dependent on others. So that can be a cause of concern. When it comes to fisheries, the positive part is we have, that particular scheme that has been launched, the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, maybe it will be able to create opportunities. If you look at the outcome framework, they are saying that 3 lakh beneficiaries will be there for this particular scheme. Okay, so yeah, that is something which is positive.
Great. Another thing that we look at is nutrition. And does the union budget play on the nutritional status of India? We understand that we currently perform slightly poorly when it comes to hunger indices. So will the budget play a role in kind of shifting the needle?
Yeah, so again, I just want to, I might digress a little, but when it comes to nutrition, there are multiple factors at play, right? When we say nutritional security of a nation or something, there are multiple things, multiple factors which lead to nutritional security. And again, in the budget, you have to look at multiple dimensions. For example, first thing that is important is whether you have sufficient amount of food available in the economy or not, right? Availability of food is important. And availability of food is again, is dependent on 2 factors. One is maybe you have the capacity to produce sufficient amount of food. Maybe you do not have the comparative advantage to produce food. Maybe the kind of geography that you have does not allow you to produce sufficient amount of food. So in that case, you should have sufficient resources to import food. But what is important is you should have food available in the economy. But availability of food does not ensure nutritional security because food might be available in the economy, but people should also have purchasing power to get that food. So accessibility is also important. For that, people need to have resources with them. They should be able to purchase it. Also, geographical accessibility is important. You might have money, but it might so happen that there are, the distribution systems are not working properly. So that is also important. So availability and accessibility. But only availability and accessibility will also not ensure that you are healthy or you are not malnutrition. The third factor here is utilization. If you are eating food, you should be able to absorb the nutrients. But many times that doesn't happen because people are not having a healthy diet, or people might not even have the right kind of health conditions. If you're falling sick quite often, then your body is just using all the nutrients that you're consuming in fighting diseases. So the public health situation also plays a role here. What kind of hygiene levels are there? What kind of sanitation levels are there? They also play a role here. So availability, accessibility, utilization, all 3 things are important. On top of that, you have to ensure that there is stability along all these lines. Food should be available throughout the year. It's not that once in a year it is available and the remaining time it is not there. Accessibility is also, financial accessibility should be there throughout the year. Maybe you have money now and the remaining part of the year, if you don't have money, that doesn't make any sense. Especially people who are the agricultural laborers, they have these problems. Maybe they will earn money during the harvest season, the remaining part of the year, they won't have incomes. And again, health conditions should remain stable throughout. It's not that you are becoming sick at some point of time. So what we need to do is we have to look at all these angles and whether union budget has provisions for this, right? So it is not just the agricultural budget. You have to look at what it is doing for sanitation and hygiene. Now, if you would have observed this year, the total allocation for health increased. But again, a part of this thing is because of the sanitation and hygiene components have also been included here. But the good thing is, previously we were allocating some 19,000 crores for hygiene and sanitation. It has been increased to somewhere around 60,000 crores. So almost 40,000 crore increase has been there for hygiene and sanitation, which can play an important role in improving the public health situation, which can help in reduction of different kind of infectious diseases, which can lead to better health outcomes. Now, when it comes to accessibility of food, when it comes to financial accessibility, geographical accessibility. Now, what we do is we provide food subsidies. We have this fair price shops. We have this extensive public distribution system, which ensures that food reaches to people. Now, here you will observe that between the last year's budget and this year's budget, there is a massive spike. So if you look at the actual expenditure for 2019-20, it was somewhere around 1,11,000 crores. And if you look at the revised estimates of 2020-2021, it is somewhere around 4,22,000 crores. So 1,11,000 crores to 4,22,000 crores. Food subsidy, this has increased. So should we be really optimistic? Should we be really happy about it? What do you think?
Is this a trick question? Because
yeah, it's a trick question.
Yeah.
So it's not the food subsidy increased that much. What happened was previously the kind of accounting methods that we are using, it was not reflecting the actual amount of food subsidy, right? So previously we were not including some of the numbers in our budget. This year, the positive thing is we have become more transparent in these kind of things. So we have changed our accounting methods, as a result of which certain numbers that we are not putting in the budget, now we have started putting it in the budget. As a result of which, this number has increased. So for the last year, 2020 and 2020-21, it increased to around 4,22,000. And the previous year actual expenditure will be around it will be somewhere around 3 lakh crores or something like that. It is not 1,11,000 crores. We are definitely spending more than that. But the concerning part is for the next year, we are saying that the budgetary estimates will be for food subsidies will be 2,42,000 crores. So last year, revised estimate is 4,22,000 crores. This year, the upcoming year, it is going to be 2,42,000 crores. So that can be slightly problematic in the sense that, I mean, yeah, maybe last year we spent a lot of money on food subsidy because there was a requirement. But the government is probably assuming that people will not require this much amount of food support. Maybe we are already back to normal. And given that our economy has contracted massively, I am not very sure whether people have the capacity. I mean, people have the capacity, people have the right kind of incomes. Also, there are some schemes that we have for providing food. You might have heard about midday meal programs, right? So midday meal programs allocation has also been reduced. Last year, schools were not working, they were not operating. So compared to that, we have reduced it. But yeah, I mean, even if schools were not operating, in many places, state governments, what they tried to do was they provided food in the homes of people. But this year it has gone down. So again, this is something which can be problematic. Apart from that, we have certain schemes, centrally sponsored schemes, through which women who are pregnant or who are lactating, they are provided nutrition. So they all come under, they used to come under what is called as the Umbrella Integrated Child Development Scheme. Now what has happened, you have renamed the scheme. Again, it is called Poshan and something like that, long name is there. But
Poshan Abhiyan.
Poshan is there, but again, there is one more component they have added. The thing is, the scheme is more or less same, but the problem is the allocation to the scheme has been reduced. So, last year the allocation was around 28,000 crores. This has been reduced to around 21,000 crores. So that is again a cause of concern because, if pregnant lactating women, they are impacted, then again, kids will also be impacted. And given the fact that in case of India, maternal mortality rates are quite high, infant mortality rates are quite high, this can lead to, I mean, the outcomes that we don't want.
Yeah, that's very interesting because often when you read numbers, we operate without pegging it against the last year. We operate without sometimes understanding how this is being calculated, and to have just the figures that you're throwing at us and like explaining it and breaking it down is kind of it's very interesting because when you're reading text, it's often that you're not able to interpret it correctly, so it can be misconstruing in some ways. So moving on to consumption, how is this likely to affect the cottage industries that are involved in food processing and food production, as well as the citizens and the consumers? Does this have the potential to shape what we eat?
I don't think there is, I mean, there will be a massive impact on the way you are consuming things. Because sometimes what happens is union budget also has provisions for promoting certain kind of food. I mean, they will have certain allocation for organic farming, let's say. But again, the allocation is very low. It will be in the range of 10 crores or 12 crores. I mean, for an individual, 10 crore, 12 crore is huge, but compare it with the total budget, right? It's minimal. So I don't think there is going to be massive changes. I think here it's the corporate players and all, they play a more important role rather than the union budget. So I don't think massive change is going to happen when it comes to consumption patterns. But if you look at consumption from another angle, that means whether people have sufficient amount of money to consume stuff, right? So that can be problematic in the sense that we might not have been out of the pandemic. The demand has gone down. There has been a massive contraction of demand. Economic activities have contracted. GDP has gone down. People have lost livelihood. People might have lost their incomes. So that way consumption would have been impacted. I mean, whether people are eating the right kind of things, and we won't get these numbers immediately. Maybe right now, some people will be conducting the surveys, and these numbers we will be getting maybe 1 year or 2 years down the road.
Okay. And does it hold any potential for like the food processing industries or anything of the sort?
Yeah, food processing industries, they have one particular scheme. So again, food processing, there is another separate ministry for that. So they have initiated one scheme called as formalization of micro food processing industries. Some 400 crore has been allocated for that. Yeah, so this is the only new thing that I could view in that I could see in the food processing sector. Not much. And again, if you look at the allocation to food processing sector, it is not that high.
Okay, great. So we've covered right from how to interpret the budget, how is it that we read it, the role that the union plays versus the state, how is it that we can interpret the numbers better. We've also kind of explored what schemes have been given a boost, also what schemes have been, for which support has been withdrawn. What do you feel is the impact of the actual delivery of the actual impact on productivity? Are there any unforeseen or unintended consequences that we may have of this budget and its allocation?
Yeah, so I mean, see, we cannot right now say that how these things will pan out, right? See, generally what happens is, as I just mentioned, some of these numbers, right, how revised budgetary estimates and revised estimates can vary. So one thing, I mean, you cannot say that the entire thing will be like that. It's always better to go for the nuances. Maybe in some areas, some scheme, the revised estimates would be low, but in some cases it might be high as well. So just having one answer to the entire thing might not be correct. It's better to look at all these heads separately, and again, compare it with the output-outcome framework. But one thing I wanted to point out here is sometimes utilization is less. I mean, whatever the government is promising, and to the ministries, the finance ministry comes out with the budget, right? And they allocate all these money to the different ministries. Sometimes they will be promising something, and they would even be ready to release the amount of money, but it might so happen that it is not utilized by the concerned ministries or the concerned departments. And for this, there can be multiple reasons. One is maybe you have not planned things properly, you overestimated things, or maybe you could have got the money, but you don't have the right kind of infrastructure mechanisms to utilize it. Maybe there is corruption. So there can be multiple factors for it. And you cannot say that for every scheme, every policy, it will be the same. So it's better to always go for the nuances rather than just have one answer for the entire thing.
That's true. Okay. So now I feel, Sarthak, if you want to have any concluding statements, or we can open up to questions. There is one question in the chat that I can take.
Yeah, so concluding statement, what I would say is when you look at the budget, you should not only be looking at the numbers, look at the output-outcome framework as well, because it gives you an idea what is the stated intention of the government, what is the stated objective of the government. That way you can understand, and again in future you can hold the government accountable. That see, last year you said that you're going to do this thing with this much amount of money, whether you have done it or not. And the problem is, in case of India, we don't have any specific institution which does it. We have the CAG, which regularly audits these kind of things. But again, it is not mandatory on their part. It's not that they will look at all the ministries, they will look at all the departments, they will look at all the schemes. They will decide on some of the schemes. So we don't have that. And again, CAG might not have the expertise to look at all these things. So it's again people like us who should be stepping in. They should be looking at all these things, and we should try to change the discourse, change the narrative.
That's very interesting. So I have a question actually before we start. Do other countries have these sort of bodies which kind of keep the checks and balances in place?
Yes. There are some countries have what is called as fiscal council. Okay, so they are all responsible for doing this. And you won't believe, in India also there has been recommendations for setting up a fiscal council. It was there in the 14th Finance Commission report. And in fact, last week, the 15th Finance Commission also came up with this report, right? They have also mentioned that we should have fiscal council. So they have talked about what sort of reforms we should have for fiscal architecture, how our fiscal architecture should change. One of the things they have suggested is have this fiscal council. It should be directly reporting to the parliament, so that again the government should not intervene and all, and they should look at all these things, and they should have experts who can understand agriculture, who can understand defense, who can understand all the different components of the budget and hold government accountable.
That's very interesting. So starting off with a question by Paranay that was sent to Edible Issues on Instagram. It says, I wanted to know what sort of trickle-down effect would the law have on the consumer at home, or even the regular bhajiwala that any household buys fruits and vegetables from, since there's such a massive supply chain in between farm and the household table.
Yeah, I mean, see, I would not say that things are going to change massively, right? Because I don't see many schemes have changed. More or less, whatever allocation, whatever schemes were there is continuation of these schemes. And for some schemes, the allocation might have been slightly changed. But if you see, there is no such new scheme that is coming up. One scheme is there, that agriculture infrastructure fund. So maybe those who are the small marginal farmers, those who are, those who are using APMCs, those who are part of these APMCs, they might get benefited to some extent. But yeah, massive. I don't see there is going to be a massive level change. Yes. Those who are small farmers who are dependent on schemes like PM Kisan for some monetary support, since there is some reduction, they might be at greater risks when it comes to Fasal Bima Yojana. So again, insurance coverage has been, or the targets have been slightly reduced, they might get impacted. But I don't think there is going to be a huge impact, because more or less we have continued the schemes. We have not brought about any massive new scheme.
Ginny again goes, so she had a question saying the policy schemes influence what we eat to a large extent. Is there an effort made to keep the cultural food intact?
I'm not sure whether policy schemes impact a lot, what we eat. See, if I'm eating Italian food, I don't think the government would have created a scheme to promote Italian food. So these impacts, I think, are more driven by the society rather than the government. So had it been driven by the government, it would have been a different thing, right? So I don't think that happens. Society plays a more important role rather than the government, and union budget is basically part of that. So yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Edible Issues again asks that, going off on Denise questions, what about schemes for heirloom crops, millets, etc.?
Yeah, so see, sometimes it might so happen that certain kind of crops can be promoted, right? See, what happens is there are certain areas where you do not, where again, you can't have regular kind of crops, or there are some areas where you will require, there are some areas which are more drought prone. So in that regions, what happens is, again, what is the option that farmers have? So maybe promote those kind of crops which you can grow in these areas. So generally millets and all these things are promoted in these regions. So they are promoting it, but at the end of the day, again, the market players and all will be creating these awareness schemes and they will be selling it. I don't know whether government's awareness scheme will be that significant in promoting these kind of food. But yeah, production will increase, and again, market players and market forces can take a lead here. Sometimes what happens, especially in these drought-prone regions, we have seen how some areas, they do not have sufficient amount of water. And again, you might have a lot of people cultivating sugarcane and all these things, which again might not be right for those regions. So their government policies can play a role. They can reduce the incentives for sugarcane farmers. Maybe they will reduce the subsidies that they get for water. Maybe they will reduce the subsidies that they get for a power supply and all those things. So that way things can change. But or else I don't think there will be a huge change in the dietary, I mean, at least the taste and preferences of people, dietary choices. Other than the budget itself, are there any research organizations or other groups that have data about the impact of policy on food production, distribution, exports? Yeah, definitely there are many organizations who are working in these areas, and I think Takshama and Elizabeth will be better. I mean, they can answer this question better. But yeah, there are many other organizations, and many organizations come up. For example, there is Food and Agricultural Organization. There are some organizations which work with government. So again, public sector government organizations can also be there. ICRISAT and all those firms are there. So yeah, there are many firms who do this thing. Do sugar, soda taxations come under the budget? Yeah, there are some mechanisms related to sugar meals as well. So government sometimes provides some form of subsidy to sugar mills. In fact, last year, the subsidy to sugar mills has also increased. I don't know the reason why the subsidy has increased, but it has increased. Soda taxations, I would assume this comes under the state budget. Some states, what they have done is, I mean, again, because people consume certain kind of food or certain kind of drinks which can be harmful for their body. And as it is harmful for their body, it also increases the health burden, right? So that health expenditure for that state might also increase. So they impose what is called as the sin taxes. I think in the past, there were talks in Kerala about imposing some sin taxes. I don't know whether they went ahead with that. But yeah, generally it is under the state budgets. I don't see that in the union budget.
I have a question, sorry, in continuation to the sugar taxation. So the thing is, we've seen that sugar, especially like the sugar mills and the sugar cane production, is primarily focused in areas which are technically drought prone. So is there a way, and so does this again then fall under the state budget, because there's a lot of kind of conflicting interests that are coming in when there's sugar production versus the farmers who,
Yeah, I get your point. So see, the problem is, if you look at agriculture, right, in India, agriculture is under the state list, right? So it is not under the union list. So what happens, as per our constitution, we have a schedule, the 7th schedule, and in that you have 3 lists, right? Union list, state list, concurrent list. So the union government should make laws only on those topics which are in the union list. State government should make laws only on those topics which are under the state list. And then there is another list, the concurrent list, on which both union and the state can make laws. Agriculture is under state list. So ideally, all these things should fall under agriculture or fall under the state's ambit. But what happens is within concurrent list, trade and all those things comes. Okay, so using some provisions under the concurrent list, the union government makes laws. Trade of different kind of commodities is part of concurrent list. Apart from that, the union government can also use national interest to promote, to make laws on certain subjects. And again, because farmers, their issues and all those things can come under this thing, so it makes law. So that is the reason this conflict is there, and it has been there for a long period of time.
Thank you.
There is one question related to also don't export-import policies under this impact. What kind of, yeah, exactly. So this is a nice question, Anusha. Yeah, export-import policies also play a very important role. Now, just think of it. In case of India, exports are restricted for different kind of agricultural commodities. It's not that it's completely restricted, but yes, at different points of time, exports can be restricted. And in fact, if you remember last year, when there was this protest going on related to the farm bills, there was also another protest going on by some onion farmers that you have put some sort of restriction on exports on onions.
Yes.
Now, yeah, so both these things are there. Now, see, if you are allowing for exports, some of the economists, they will suggest that why not open for exports, right? Why not completely liberalize this entire sector? That way, what will happen? I mean, the advantage here is your farmers right now, they are just selling it to your domestic market, right? So what happens here is the market is restricted. But if you are letting exports happen, in that case, what will happen? You are now getting a larger market. So in that case, the farmers might stand benefited. But generally, the assumption, perception is there that if they start selling outside, we might not have sufficient amount of food for our own our requirements, and it might create problems. But again, these fears might be misplaced because we already are a food surplus nation. The problem there is we have so a lot of food grains, the other kind of things, vegetables, fruits. Here we have not been able to focus on. Maybe we need to focus on those areas. But yeah, you can import these things as well, provided you have the capacity to do so.
Kumud has a question saying, what does agriculture infrastructure exactly entail under the budget, tech, research, training?
Yeah, Kumud, it's again a very interesting question. Just think of it. What kind of infrastructure is required in agriculture? So let's say you are a farmer, or let's say I am a farmer. Okay, so let's say I'm cultivating tomatoes. And this year I worked really hard. And again, the nature has also been quite good. The rain and everything was fine. And now I have got bumper harvest. So is it good for me or not if I have a bumper harvest? Just think of it. So I am having bumper harvest. That means the supply of tomatoes in the market is increasing all of a sudden. All the farmers who are producing tomatoes in the locality in the same region, they're all having a bumper harvest. So the supply of tomatoes will increase, but the demand for tomatoes, it will not increase equally, right? So what will happen? The price will crash. So if you are good at producing something, if you have done well, and given that the market is restricted, the prices will crash. I will not get sufficient returns. So in that case, what is required? Maybe I have to have the right kind of infrastructure where I can store these tomatoes and I can release the tomatoes on a staggered basis. Maybe I need to have the right kind of transport mechanisms so that I can easily transport tomatoes from this region to some other far region, and I can sell it over there, and I might get the right kind of prices. So all these things, cold storage facilities, transportation facilities, all these things will be part of agriculture, infrastructure development in agriculture.
Also, sorry, just in case if you want to get on the mic and ask your questions, or even respond to some of the answers that Sarthak is saying, please feel free to do that. So yeah, we can head to Arzu. So Arzu says you had mentioned MSPs for the farmers and why that is one of the reason the current situation of the farmers' agitation. The parent bill for the same has a certain parameter under which the MSP should be decided, but the MSP is much lower than that. Do we see that changing anytime soon?
Yeah, so I can't say this. I mean, I can't forecast how things will happen. But yeah, I mean, in the past also, what has happened was we had committees who tried to understand this thing. There was this MS Swaminathan committee. They had also recommended that MSP should be fixed like this, but that has not happened. And whether things will change or not, I'm not sure. I mean, it all depends on whether the farmers are able to convince the government, whether the government is convinced. So I'm not sure about it. And given that in the last, in this budget, there was decreased allocations to some schemes which ensure MSP, the MIS as well as that PM Asha scheme. So I mean, if that is an indication, I am not sure whether MSPs will be increasing. But see, one more thing here, you also have to look at this entire MSP issue from another angle as well. So there are again multiple problems with MSPs. MSPs are not there for multiple different kind of crops. And when you have MSPs for certain kind of crops, generally what will happen, everyone will be incentivized to grow those specific food grains, rice and wheat specifically. And again, these are grown in some areas where again, the ecology also doesn't support that. So again, water tables have gone down. There are other issues as well. So we might have to think of that as well. So if you are raising MSP, these kind of disincentives are also created. These kind of unintended consequences can be there. So maybe we have to look for other options, other alternatives as well to MSPs. Sharmila asks, do you think agri-research needs more focus? Definitely, agri-research is something which needs more focus. In fact, any form of research needs more focus in case of India. If you look at R&D, where does India stand? And again, here, I won't say that it should be the government which should be involved in all these things. Government should play a role. Government should create that enabling environment, conducive environment where R&D can happen. So I won't say that government itself should always get involved in R&D, but government should create a mechanism, that ecosystem, where there can be higher amount of research and development. That is more important. Now, if you look at how R&D expenditures happen in different countries, if you look at some of the best countries when it comes to research and development, that means who have the highest amount of output from R&D, the number of papers, number of patents, then you will not find government spending the largest part of R&D. So it will be the private players who spend the larger part. Government also spends, but a smaller part it spends. If you look at India, in case of India, if you look at the total R&D budget, so 60% of it is being spent by government, while the remaining 40% is being spent by private players. But the total output is very low. So this also needs to change somewhere. Government spending should be low. Government should be creating an environment where more private players pitch in, and they should take the lead in agri research, and again for other areas as well, health research or other dimensions.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need more investment, definitely.
Rini has a question. Good Food Institute, which focuses on, it's more of a statement.
Yeah,
Good Food
observation.
Institute, yeah, which focuses on smart protein research can be an example.
Definitely. So again, and it is not just on protein research, other kinds of research, right? On fisheries also. One thing I wanted to point out here is animal sciences, right? So this year, the government's budgetary allocation to animal sciences research has gone down. Fisheries research is more or less same, but animal sciences research has gone down. So yeah, different kind of research should be taken up. Many organizations are doing it. I mean, just you can Google it, you will find out. So it's not something which is that difficult to spot. And again, research along multiple lines. It can be on research related to agriculture infrastructure. It can be related to different kind of pests that can impact agriculture, different kind of diseases that can impact the fishery sector or the dairy sector, what needs to be done when it comes to infrastructure development. So there are multiple verticals along which research should happen, and yeah, that's what.
So as you mentioned, any other organizations? So you mentioned a couple of
yeah.
What do you call it? Sectors that they are currently in.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions? Anyone can also unmute and ask if there's anything.
Dakshima, I just wanted to maybe jump in because
Sure.
we were talking about seaweed the other day and the Blue Revolution scheme. And this was a very interesting part in terms of, budget and investment and outcomes, right, which can be very two different things, especially with what's happening on the ground. And I don't know, maybe Dakshima, you want to just explain the context a little more about what we heard from Gabriela about investment in invasive species, and what and connecting that to also thinking about what is being actually invested in and how that could also affect livelihoods and ecology. I was thinking, yeah.
So we've tried to, as Elizabeth pointed out, we were trying to understand the seaweed landscape in India. What we were very excited about was that there was an increase in funding that we found, whether it was in Pradhan Mantri Matsya Yojana. They have also allocated specific, they've also allocated specific funds to promoting seaweed production. There are a lot of self-help groups that are being set up, especially in two prominent regions such as Tamil Nadu and Gujarat, which are both along the coast, both have multiple species. So, but however, one perspective we got was that while we are promoting and allocating funds to it, the kind of seaweed that we're actually promoting growth of is an invasive species from Philippines, which has the ability to damage corals. So that is, and because the people who are there on the committee may be having some sort of vested interest or would possibly benefit from the production of that particular seaweed, since it provides phycocolloids, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but which essentially helps in different industries such as cosmetics, perfumes, etc. So the thing is that how exactly is then how effective is a scheme exactly when it's kind of going back into damaging the ecosystem, but also is possibly going to be benefiting a few major stakeholders.
So, Takshama, was it a question or an observation?
It was more of an observation, more of a
exactly. You see, in fact, if you look at history also, right, India's history after independence, we had a particular phase when we used different kind of high yield variety seeds, right, to increase our agriculture production. Green revolution is the term that we use for that. So in 1960s, at that point of time, we are faced with different kind of challenges, right? So we had wars, we had droughts, we are dependent on for our food on countries like US. So that kind of situation was there, and we went ahead with green revolution. So we used high yield variety seeds, but when you are using high yield variety seeds, you also have to ensure that they have to be irrigated properly. You have to use different kind of pesticides, fertilizers. It ensured that we have food, sufficient amount of food production. We became a food grain surplus nation, but the impacts of many of these things we are getting to witness now. So again, that entire thing, sustainable development and all, it comes into the picture here. So you might use technology. At the end of the day, technology is a tool which makes, technology is nothing but it's a set of tools which makes things more efficient. Maybe it makes more things easier, it makes things cheaper. But at the same time, how effective it is in the long run, we need to evaluate. So the scheme that we're talking about right now, again, it needs to be evaluated in those lines. Maybe you should have environmental impact assessment of different provisions. The thing that I mentioned, fiscal council. If you have something like a fiscal council, it can monitor all these things, whether something that you intended to achieve, you achieved that, or it has led to some other kind of problems, right? So these kind of mechanisms can help you address that.
And I think that conversation holds value when it comes to so many things under the scope of agriculture, whether it's a conversation about bringing back BT crops, whether it is certain varieties of rice, which are hybrid varieties, or GM crops. And yes, exactly, like having an impact assessment, understanding a long-term consequences before rolling out schemes is something that holds a lot of merit.
But one thing here, we also should not have that kind of attitude that, okay, something which is from outside is bad.
That's true. Yeah.
Because xenophobia is also something which is on the rise. So we should be more scientific in our approach.
Yeah.
Be evaluating things on the basis of its merit. We should be deciding.
Yeah.
Rather than having an ideological bias. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So unless anyone has any other questions, I think that we can conclude this session. It's been very enriching. I think we've had a great conversation. Before everyone leaves, so thank you, Sarthak. It was great and it was lovely having you. Thank you so much for volunteering your time and coming and spending 1 hour of your time kind of decoding this for us. For everyone else who has joined in, it would be lovely to understand and get your feedback on the session. So this is one of the first sessions we've had, which is, and we hope to have more of these conversations in the future, and also getting people from different, fields and industries to make this conversation more rich. So Edible Issues has just put a link in the bio in the chat. So it would be great if you could just, it'll take less than a minute, but it would be very valuable to us. So yeah. And thank you, Sarthak, again. It was really lovely.
Thanks, Takshama. It's a pleasure for me as well.